It's a little frazzled, running, trying to do 10 things at once.
Yeah, I hear that. Same here, campaign season, right?
Yeah, the bottomless pit.
Very much so.
So how's your campaign coming?
It's going well. We were the first ones on the ballot for any office in Berkeley. We have a lot of, we get public financing, so that's great, where the city matches us 6 to 1. And we have a lot of name recognition because I go around Berkeley all over. And so we're set to win. Yeah. How about yours?
Well, we're getting public funding. We're the only campaign in the country to have qualified for federal primary matching funds.
Yes.
An old reform goes back to Watergate days, and the major party candidates, because you have to limit how much you can spend on your primaries if you accept it. So the limit is a little over $50 million, and that's not enough for the corporate parties. But it helps us, and none of the other independent or third party candidates qualified. So we're the only ones this year, which is a big help, you know, because we're fighting to get on the ballot. We're on 36 states you can vote for us now, but we still got 14 we're working on.
That's awesome, though. I mean, you're getting closer.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just a mad scramble from the time of the convention when we got nominated on July 11th. Last 3 petitions are due September 4th. And last week was really crazy. There was 10 due. I think we got 6 of them on the ballot, and the others are write-ins. Well, one is neither. That's South Dakota. They don't have write-in. And if you can't get the petition done, you're just not in the election. So that's one state where people won't be able to vote for us.
Well, I think with the interview, we could talk about how we're doing our tactics on the ground. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's something Greens need to get better at.
Yeah, I mean, we also need to have the backing of all of us, like at whatever level of knowledge and experience we have, to really come together and share that information, because I know some people don't get it.
Yeah, it's something. Nothing substitutes for experience. You know, you can be told in the abstract what you need to do, but then to go out and actually do it, it's a little different. You know, like you need 5,000 signatures to get on a ballot in a state, and people say, "Oh, you know, that don't sound so hard." But then you go out and start asking people, particularly in this COVID environment where we're supposed to be socially distanced, and it's you know, it's tougher. And you know, there are little tricks like on that. You know, you get more signatures the more people you ask. So my thing is, can you help us out or help me out with a signature to get the Green Party on the ballot?
Nice.
And then people got to like personally say no to you because you're not helping them. So
yeah, exactly.
That's my little trick. And other people want to like give them the whole green platform before they ask for the signature. And I don't think that works as well. Most people will just sign because they believe, or not, because of whether or not they believe in candidates being on the ballot. And I would say 1 in 100 really wants to talk about the policies. But that's like a vacation from petitioning, because you get a little break, you get to talk some politics.
No, I hear that. For me, it's like I got my associate's degree in communications, so I'm all primed for the marketing and really making sure that people get the small bit of information. So when I was running for trying to get public financing, I was like, if 10 people can give $10, we'll make it. And so that was a really good show of how we get involved with public finance. It's all marketing at the end of the day, but the establishment parties are really good at it. And I think it makes it a little bit more beautiful how Green Party members don't use establishment tactics and try to find their own creative ways or their own personal ways to make their story really shine.
Well, I think one thing I've found in elections is, particularly local elections, Greens bring issue. And the Democrats and Republicans are used to running in these gerrymandered districts where if you get designated or there's a primary and you win the primary, then you're in. And so they're used to not really campaigning. I mean, here in Syracuse, we've had disaffected Democrats come to run with us as Greens, people who had been in office before on the city council. And they came to our meeting and they said, "You're going to have to help me. I've never done this before," even though they'd been in office.
Yeah,
we got to really...
Howie, do you want to start with the interview? Make some introductions, maybe
sure.
Talk about like where we stand on some issues. Okay.
So I was waiting for you to, you want me to introduce myself? Or
I think so.
Okay. Well, my name's Howie Hawkins. I'm the Green Party candidate for president. I also have the nomination of the Socialist Party USA, which is functionally more of a endorsement than a nomination because they don't have any ballot lines, but we're happy to carry through the great tradition of Debsian socialism. And we're also seeking some state independent progressive party ballot lines like the Progressive Party in Oregon, because what we're trying to do is build a united front against both the greater and lesser evil, because Trump, just take the coronavirus thing. I mean, it's a total disaster. 4% of the world's population and 25% of the deaths. You know, he gave up. He's a loser. But I'm getting angrier and angrier at Joe Biden. He's a presumptive nominee. He lives within commuter distance of the White House press corps. He could convene them and pound away every day. We need a federal test, contact trace, and quarantine program, suppress community spread of the virus so we can get back to work and back to school. And while he's at it, he could pick another issue every day. Like Trump is destroying the post office. I sent overnight mail the other day for ballot access in this state. It took 4 days. It got there at 3:30 and the filing was due at 5. The guy had to drive 35 miles to get it filed just in time. And I get my money back every time they don't deliver that overnight mail. So it's losing the post office money. But that seems to be the purpose. So I'm getting into the issues. Just about me. I'm a retired Teamster. I came up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1960s and got swept up in the civil rights and anti-Vietnam War movement. And from that time, I've been committed to an independent party on the left. Because in '64, Reagan was campaigning against fair housing. They repealed the Run for Fair Housing law in a referendum, the Republicans. And the Democrats sat the Dixiecrats from Mississippi instead of the Freedom Democrats. So I was 12 years old. I said, where's my party? Which was Peace and Freedom in '68. In some ways, that was the first Green Party in the sense that it came out of the New Left. And they actually had in their platform, the Richmond platform, not just a conservation section. They had an ecology section that talked about the interrelationship between how society is organized and how we affect the environment. So anyway, I've been involved in the Green Party since our first national organizing meeting in 1984. And the Greens have run me for three times for governor in New York. And we got enough votes to get the ballot line every time. Got 5% in 2014, in a year when Governor Cuomo wanted to get more than he got when he was first elected in 2010, more than his father Mario ever got, to lay the basis to run for president. And we got 5%, and he got less. So we had to look at what we were saying to compete for our voters. We couldn't be taken for granted. And out of that election, we got a number of demands we've been campaigning on that he had never supported before. A $15 minimum wage, a ban on fracking, paid family leave, a millionaire's tax. So that shows you don't have to win the office to move the debate and move the agenda. That's one of our goals in this presidential race. So I guess a lot of people asked me to run because they saw those governor's races. And, you know, I had run a large scale campaign before. So, but nothing like this. This is like running 51 races for governor because you got 50 states in DC and every state's got a.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. I lost sound for a second.
I hear you.
Sorry for the interruption. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
So anyway, that was done. That was my introduction. So who the hell are you?
So for my end, this is going to be an interesting interview because I can't hear, but I'm used to that, right? So if you want, I can introduce myself really quickly while I fix it on the technical end.
Okay.
Okay. So my name's Aidan Hill. I use they, them pronouns. I'm in Berkeley. I'm a California native. I lived in Southern California, Fontana, and then moved to Berkeley for university. I went to UC Berkeley in 2016, and as we know, 2016 was an interesting year, especially with this president being elected. It was a different experience for me because of that. The political climate started boiling over like in the 1960s. And as I continued with my studies, I really found a sanctuary at People's Park, which was created in the 1960s as a result from the civil rights movement and really the fight against Ronald Reagan's privatization. And so it kind of had a home to me. But as I continued to move towards this world that we're in 2020, I noticed that something was deeply wrong. Our oceans were dying. We were losing access to forestry. Parks started being destroyed. We had a lack of healthcare coverage, especially with coronavirus. And I really thought to myself, well, I have this understanding of politics. I have this unique experience being in an alternative party. And I really want to bring that to the table. And so I ran for city council in 2018, really trying to save the only green space that I have in my district. And that was People's Park. And then because of that, I learned all the history, all the experiences. I talked to the people who made that place so special. And I really understood that this was a fight for free speech and freedom of expression and freedom of creativity against a machine that really tries to boil us down into a yes or no. And they were trying to gentrify us, the UC Berkeley. They were trying to gentrify all the parks that were community made from the beginning. And I was like, this isn't right. And I looked to my city. I joined the city commissions under homelessness because that's the primary people that I work with, those who are unable to achieve their dreams because of the social structure that we have. And I asked them, and I was like, you know, this is a refuge for so many people in our area. This is actually the only green space in our area. Nothing. They didn't say anything. They just said, well, that's nice. We're going to build a 15-story building right on that spot, and you're going to have to deal with it. And so after I kept trying the city route and trying to do public comments with the city council, and mind you, you get 2 minutes to speak in an agenda that sometimes runs from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. And I was like, that's not democracy. That's not how we should be treating this world. We need an open government. We need to have actual climate solutions. We need to make sure that public health is a priority. And so that's really what I'm trying to bring in my mayor campaign. If I was elected mayor, I'd be the youngest youngest mayor in Berkeley's history. And that's historic because I get to talk to young people on their level. And I think that's something that's sorely missing when we're talking about Donald Trump or Joe Biden. We're ignoring the voices of those who don't have their world experience. And so that's why I'm running. I'm trying to build a bridge across all of us, because Berkeley is a heavily Democratic city, and I have to work across the lines. What I tell them is the earth isn't just red, the earth isn't blue, it's green and blue. It's the earth and the water. And I think together, especially against this enemy that's known as the Republican Party right now, at least we have a chance to survive. And so I bring the green values, and I really show up in a way that's decentralized, that really focuses on grassroots energy. And as much as I try, I have to push against that machine that's always a corporate structure. And so thank you for hearing me out. I wanted to let you speak to your people while I get this tech stuff.
Okay, well, if Berkeley's like most cities, and Berkeley was when I was coming up, behind the Democratic Party is the real estate machine. In all our urban governments, just about, it's the landlords, the developers, the bankers and lawyers that make a lot of money based on city policy and contracts as well, and permits, like to put a 15-story building on people's park. The Democratic machine is backed by the real estate industry. And that's why, despite these so-called progressive Democrats running Berkeley, they're going to put a 15-story building on people's park unless you can stop it. You know, I'm going down to Bethesda, Maryland, where there's an old African-American cemetery, the site of what was a tobacco plantation and then a slave breeding plantation. And it was a black community, and white folks had pushed out the black folks, and now they want to pave over the cemetery for a parking lot. And, you know, people say that Democrats are the lesser evil, but they so damn evil, we need to get them out of there too. You know, there's no doubt what the Republicans are doing. And so I think the Democratic voters, they're generally progressive, or a lot of them are. You know, it shows in the support Bernie Sanders got. But the politicians, they're bought and paid for it. And, you know, I'm thinking right now about what's going on in Congress. You know, they're at an impasse on providing a COVID relief package. And Urban Institute estimates 40 million evictions by October. We've got, according to official unemployment, it's 10%. But when you count the underemployed, the people discouraged, labor participation rate is down, it's more like 25%. And if people go to the National Jobs for All Coalition website, they'll break that down for you. They have a chart they put up every month. And then people who lost their employment and their health insurance connected to employment are sitting in this plague without health insurance.
Yeah.
And the government, you know, particularly for COVID treatment, which can run over $1 million. We've seen a number of reports on bills like that. Those people need help. And our government, we want to go on vacation for a month.
Yeah. Do you want to say some ideas about how we can help them? Because I think with both of our platforms, we can really devise some low-cost solutions, because obviously the federal government is going to help. I mean, it's obvious. If anything, they're defunding the resources for us to have supplies. So what can we bring to the table as Greens?
We got to get involved in these mutual aid projects, whether it's resisting evictions, helping the people who are homeless, you know, with food, and reference to what services remain. I mean, if they don't provide about $1 trillion to state and local governments, the cuts are going to be on the order of 20 to 50% for a lot of these services, including schools. I mean, we're in a real calamity. But I got to say, as a presidential candidate, what the federal government should do. I mean, we have a housing program. It's part of our Green New Deal. And, you know, Bernie Sanders and AOC got a lot of attention for they call it their Green New Deal housing program. And they're going to build 2.5 million units of public housing over 10 years. Well, we're going for 10 times that, 25 million units, $2.5 trillion program. And people say, oh, you're crazy. But, you know, in 1968, when the Fair Housing Act passed, the third Civil Rights Act, they also had a bill to provide 25 million units of affordable housing. So the ambition was there. The problem was, instead of public housing, which is cheaper, you get more units per dollar spent than if you subsidize private developers. They tried to build these 25 million units with so-called public-private partnerships, which means the public pays and the private profits. And that's been a disaster. That's what we've been doing for subsidized housing since that time.
Well, I thank you for doing that, especially in my space in Berkeley, we're facing the same thing. All of the developments right now are public-private. There's no public-public partnerships. Barely we're trying to get some housing that has affordable development units below market rate housing, but it's at a proportion of 20 units market rate to 6 units below market rate. And that doesn't help anyone. And don't even get me started about Section 8 housing, because Section 8 housing is supposed to make the public housing sector available. But because we have so many people who are below income or below median income, they're not allowed to get those market rate housings. So something I want to bring forward that I think really aligns with you is the focus on rehabilitating rundown vacant properties, making sure that we have public sector work, focusing on building those things, use resources like tiny houses to make sure that people are housed, and to repeal laws that harm unhoused people. In Berkeley, our incumbent mayor has a law that prevents RV members of our community from sleeping, and even a law that prevents unhoused people from holding space no more than 9 square feet in a certain given time. And I don't think those things are right. I think we actually need solutions. And like you were saying, the effects of the climate are going to hurt so hard. We're facing wildfires right now. We have coronavirus that's a multiplier on those effects. And we don't know if there's going to be floods or not. We have a shifting climate everywhere. And so I really do thank you for doing the fight and the work that we all rely upon, because without you doing that work, we wouldn't know where to start, right? And so thank you for that.
Do you have a law against source of income discrimination? That
we have a law.
Yeah. Okay. You got to enforce it.
It's not always followed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it. Half the job is getting the law passed. The other half is getting it enforced.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that's good, because most communities do not. So Section 8, the rationale was, well, we're not going to build public housing. We're going to give you money and you can go live anywhere you want. But that's not the way it works. Yeah. You know, you go into the upscale communities, they don't want you. So you're forced back into the hood. And so now you're living under a private landlord instead of a public landlord, at their mercy with your Section 8 voucher. So you have even less say than you do. Not that our housing authorities are very responsive or democratic. That's a whole nother thing we should talk about.
And it's usually elders who have that Section 8 housing. And so these predatory landlords are hurting our elders from being able to shelter in place. I have so many seniors here in Berkeley who are afraid of being put on the street because of this coronavirus. And, you know, they're worried about where they're going to keep their medicine, where are they going to be able to sleep and wake up easily to use the restroom. These common things that we all take for granted sometimes. It's really starting to make people awaken to the reality of the situation that we're in, is that we don't have a system within a country that doesn't protect people, but rather protects profits. And those profits being the large data barons like Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, who continuously profit while we're all struggling on the sides.
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on for 50 years. You know, wages have been stagnant since 1973. The cost of housing, healthcare, and college in particular have gone through the roof. So, you know, young people are feeling it. The opportunities aren't there, particularly now in this COVID depression. But my generation, the baby boomers, a lot of them, they worked, they raised their families, but with stagnant wages and increasing costs, they're retiring without any savings. Social Security keeps them below the poverty line. So, you know, one thing we want to do is double Social Security benefits so every senior has enough income so they're living above poverty. I even know seniors who got to school, you know, like in their 40s, borrowed. I know one that she was actually Medgar Evers' assistant in the NACP in Mississippi when he was assassinated, got involved in SNCC, went north with the movement with King to Chicago, and finally got into school in the 80s. Her name's Coley Clark. And she actually taught at SUNY Albany, State University of New York, Albany for a while. And now she's retired, living in Harlem. She's in her 70s. And her Social Security check is being garnished for student loans back in the 80s. I mean, this is, and then here's another thing. The student loans, the federal government charges 4 to 7% interest. They're making money off this. The point is to get kids through school. And even if they got to borrow, you know, do it at interest free.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I can speak on that actually, because I'm a student at UC Berkeley, and this is what drove all this madness into my political life, trying to get a public education at a public university, think it was all like, oh, I'll be able to get my degree in 4 years. Meanwhile, we have climate catastrophes every year and social civil unrest, and even COVID right now, where students are so afraid about what's going to happen with their education. You know, like the public education system, especially in California, we had this goal when it was created, the California Master Plan, that allowed anyone who wanted to get a public education to be able to do so. But like you're saying with Reagan, they started putting taxes and they started putting tuition hikes onto students. And essentially that stopped our organizing, right? Because after 4 years, we're gone, and a new generation is so used to it being oh, it's a $17,000 tuition, oh, it's an $18,000 tuition, because they don't have that historical understanding of where we got to where we are now. And I can tell you that these schools, especially universities like Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, they have the understanding, they have the research. Even at UC Berkeley, the creator of CRISPR technology is right here. We have the understanding of what to do. I mean, if I was mayor right now, I would say, well, use open spaces as places of learning. You can dedicate time to being outdoors, make sure there's hand washing stations, make sure you have projectors and speakers. That's not hard, but here we are at 2020, waiting for the fall semester to start in a few weeks for some and already started for others. They don't have the opportunity to know where they're going for classes. And so I just think it's a failure of how degraded our public systems are, and even the private systems, on how they're supposed to treat people. But again, it's always in this dichotomy in capitalism, it's always about profits over people's lives. And that really draws the parallel, what you're talking with the baby boomers. Like they're taking Social Security money away. Why? Why? Is it really that profitable to take money away from seniors and young folks? No, it's not. It doesn't help anyone. And this spiral that's continuing, we definitely have to get off it, because if we don't have an actual Green New Deal and actual green policies that are in place, climate change will just, like a wave, ride over us. And I think it's time for people like us to really spread our word, to make sure people know that we have kind-hearted, understanding, knowledgeable people with experience who want to take these offices and really give something back to the community.
yeah, no doubt. And we gotta get the people in there out, because they're using government to benefit their donors. I mean, that's locally, it's the real estate industry. Federally, it's, you know, big tech, big pharma, big health insurance, big weapons manufacturers. And, you know, the people are an afterthought. I mean, they want us to vote for them, but then they want us to go away between elections. And, you know, like I say, the two governing parties are presiding over a failed state. You know, they couldn't deal like most organized societies with suppressing the virus. Now they can't provide relief for people that desperately need it. And another issue, you know, I wrote about yesterday, it was in Counterpunch with Madeline Hoffman, a Green candidate for U.S. Senate, about, it was Hiroshima Day, the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. And we're in a new nuclear arms race. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has their doomsday clock, the closest it's ever been to midnight. None of the candidates in the major parties talked about that. Biden and Trump aren't talking about it because they both support this nuclear modernization program the U.S. has embarked upon, which is destabilizing the world. Now Russia and China are doing it. We're in a new nuclear arms race. And, you know, so what we're calling for are peace initiatives. Cut the military budget 75%. Get out of these endless wars. Pledge no first use of nuclear weapons. And go to the other nuclear powers and say, we want complete and mutual nuclear disarmament. We're not a threat to you anymore. Let's get rid of these weapons of mass destruction. And go there with world public opinion. 3 years ago, last month in July, 122 nations agreed to the text of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It becomes law when 7 more countries sign. Nigeria just signed. And the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. And nobody in this country hardly knows that, because the leadership of both parties, the presidential candidates, the senatorial candidates, they're not talking about it. And the corporate news media, which I call, you know, state media for the two-party corporate state, they're not talking about it either. So we have this life and death issue hanging over our heads, and it's not even being talked about in the campaign.
Yeah.
You know, one of our goals is to make it a top campaign issue, but you know, we got to get it heard in the mainstream media. That's even harder than getting on a ballot.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I think a lot of Berkeleyans would agree with you. Berkeley's actually a nuclear-free city declared by law. But something people don't know is that Ernest Lawrence, who was at UC Berkeley, helped develop the cyclotron. And what happened with that is that we used those weapons against Japan unknowingly, unwillingly, and it was an executive decision. It was something that they just wanted to test run. And that's how this government has treated people, as test subjects, right? And the science isn't there. Even though we have these nuclear arms treaties, the US doesn't understand that if they throw a nuclear weapon out into the public, the currents of the air are just going to come right back onto us. If any single state uses nuclear weapons, we're all affected by it. And so this deterrent strategy doesn't work. It's actually mutual destruction. And I think that's what a lot of people say. It's not about if one has more technology power or weapon power over another. If you're not taking care of the entire ecosystem, then what are we doing it for? And so it comes down to me from this mechanistic mindset versus this ecological mindset. And the mechanistic mindset, which is really rooted in capitalism, patriarchy, and human supremacy, that says people are objects, that we have units like chess pieces, and those same people don't get a chance to know the game because they're not the ones holding it. They're not the ones moving the pieces. But this ecological mindset is that we're all moving the pieces. We're all simultaneously alive and breathing, and even the trees are breathing. Even the water itself is breathing. And that's where we go back to the indigenous concepts of water being the blood of the earth, and that we're from the land and we grow from the land. And it's these two competing ideologies, in my opinion. And really, the United States is the centerpiece with its military might for the mechanistic mindset. We have this fourth generation of human thought and ideologies, the indigenous generation of how we perceive society as a whole. Because at the end of the day, when the Spanish came and colonized this land in Berkeley, the Ohlone land, they took away religion. They took away the redwood forest and made them into houses, these missionaries. And then the gold rush really pushed Confederates, let's just say, they were Confederates, to come and take more indigenous land and create these institutions known as UC Berkeley. But those Confederates came from institutions like Yale and Harvard. And so we have this machine that uses our security, our education, and our natural resources against us, when on the other ideology, the ecological concept, people are breathing and experiencing, but what they're breathing now is polluted air. They're eating polluted food with sugars and trans fats and corn syrup. And all these things are creating a dysfunctional mindset. And so that's why I really push in Berkeley that we need patient-first mental health solutions, because if you don't even know the chemicals that you're ingesting into your body, how are you going to make sure that what you believe and perceive and experience is what you actually experience? It gets that far in. And until we develop this system that treats people as living, breathing beings with their own determination, self-determination, we can't really fight against what these war powers are trying to do, because we don't understand why war is happening in the first place. And so that's something I love about the Green Party, and it's really led to my understanding, especially as a young person, is that the world isn't binary. It isn't just left, right. There's also a million other directions to go. And the Green Party, because it has ballot access, one of the only 4 major parties with ballot access in this time where the Postal Service is taken out, where Trump's trying to be king of America, we stand a legal chance to really show that people can participate in democracy. People can work on nonviolence. We can have a future focus, and that not all hope is lost. And so, yeah, that's my idea. And I think you're right on the mark where you're talking about where these struggles come from and how we can alleviate them. Now we just have to make sure people understand us.
Yeah. You know, what you're talking about is the same ideas and institutions that rationalize the exploitation of human by human are extended out into nature and justifies the exploitation and the misuse and abuse of nature. So to reharmonize humanity with nature, we got to reharmonize human with human.
Yes.
So people say, oh, the Greens, they're a bunch of tree huggers, environmentalists. No, we're ecologists. We understand that how society is organized is going to determine how we interact with nature. So we need a cooperative and democratic economy and society in order to have a harmonious relationship with nature and restore sustainability. And that is, yeah, you're not going to get that from the Democrats or Republicans because they're about making money. You know, the political elites and the business elites that back them.
And they always have to listen to someone higher up the chain, right? Like, even if they want to make their own decisions at the local level, the Democratic Party by law says you can't endorse anyone who's not a Democrat. You can't even invite them to your meetings. So, of course, these people who are just trying to get somewhere into influence and power, they're not even listening to other ideas because they have to listen to the Central Democratic Committee. It's that insidious. It's not just people don't want to listen. It's that the influencing structures make it impossible to have a real choice. And
that's exactly why progressives who go into the Democratic Party to change it or make it more progressive, no, they don't change it. It changes them. And I'm sure you can point to examples in Berkeley, but I'll point to a couple of national examples. Bernie Sanders' signature issue was Medicare for all. Now that he has to support Biden because the whole leadership of the Democratic Party closed ranks against him, he's compromised. He said, okay, well, I'll accept Biden's proposal of Medicare for all over 55 and for the children. But in between, we're going to have private insurance with the public option to buy into Medicare. That's, you know, Bernie Sanders just sold himself out. Or take Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who gets a lot of headlines. She's, you know, very adept at presenting herself in the media, but you know, she took the Green Party's signature issue of the 2010s, the Green New Deal, and when she introduced the non-binding resolution to Congress, it was watered down. They took the brand and diluted the content. So no ban on fracking and new fossil fuel infrastructure in that non-binding resolution. And that's like the frontline demand for the climate movement. Because if we build this fossil fuel infrastructure, we're locked into decades more burning fossil fuels and the planet is cooked. They cut out the cuts to military spending to help fund the Green New Deal. they cut out the phase out of nuclear power. And she's pro-nuclear now. Nuclear power is 2 or 3 times more costly than wind and solar if you do the levelized life cycle cost. It's a dead end. It's a waste of money, besides being dirty, dangerous, and uneconomical. And then the other thing they do is extend the deadline for zero emissions from 2030 to 2050. So
is there going to be a planet that's livable in 2050 if we continue on this path? No.
Well, and then the Democrats took that non-binding resolution and they never let them vote on it in the House. In the Senate, when they voted on it, Schumer and Markey, who introduced it with AOC, said, it's a trick. We're going to vote president. You know, McConnell wanted all the Democrats, half of them running for president, to get on the record. So they all voted president, except 4 of those damn Democratic senators voted with Republicans no on the Green New Deal. And you look at the draft Democratic platform on climate, there's the words Green New Deal aren't even in there. They aren't even stealing the brand anymore. Biden is for fracking the hell out of the country and then burning it in gas-fired power plants. And he said he's going to capture and sequester the carbon, which is not economical. They're not going to do that. And he wants to build nuclear power plants. I mean, this is an industry program, not a climate program.
Yeah.
So
we have a question.
Okay, I'll just sum this up by saying Trump calls climate change a hoax, but the Democrats act as if it's a hoax.
So the question from Anastasia, hi Anastasia, what's Aidan's plan for Berkeley to get carbon neutral? Good question. So I look at it holistically, right? For me, climate resilience and adaptation means accessibility. And that means that all people have to have access to public resources. And so a big part of my plan for just cutting carbon emissions right off the bat is making an efficient and streamlined form of transportation that includes disability. So right now we have a private AC transit and BART system that gets people from A to B. Otherwise, people have to use Uber and Lyft. And if we could just make sure that bus lines or rapid transportation is available for people who live in different areas of Berkeley, that would not only increase the ability for us to have multiple people using the same vehicle, share riding, but also allow people to not have to walk too far or drive their car to get to a place of transportation. Another thing I really want to focus on is the universal right to energy. So in Berkeley, we had some PG&E outages that really affected people's standard of living, especially those who are on assistive technology. And so we have to really make sure that everyone has that basic right to energy, which includes solar power, which includes thermal cooling, making sure that we have off power grids to enhance electricity, and even batteries. Batteries are an important thing that every block should have to rely on excess power that's brought by solar energy. I also believe that we need more efficient waste policies. We need more recycling. We need to use those recycled materials that are inventive and creative, and zero waste and knowledge sharing and a transitional economy that prioritizes good business practices, including those waste and energy and efficient cycles, that really focuses on upping the incentives for green tech versus old technologies such as oil, gasoline, and making sure that we have accessibility. Last thing on that point, transportation with bicycle safety, making sure that there's connectivity on how we know where to go, especially with our mapping structures, and making more efficient streets, and really focusing on using trans-bay vessels and ships. I know this is a lot, but trans-bay vessels and ships to take products from San Francisco to Berkeley to Oakland, rather than using, for example, the coal trains, or even using excess carbon fuels by transportation. I think that would be a more efficient use of our energy structure. I know that was a long answer, but if you want to learn more, you can also go to my website, hill.vote, and you can contact our team, and I'll make sure you get all the information. Thanks for the question.
How's the movement to take over PG&E going? Because if we get control of our utility, then we get to choose what kind of electric generation we do, whether it's gas or whether it's solar and wind, and whether we put in the storage in the smart grid so we can accommodate solar and wind. So I know that they're in bankruptcy, and what's the status of that campaign?
It's going. It kind of transitioned into no 5G into the Berkeley area, but where we left off with fighting against PG&E was really as a result of Gavin Newsom, our governor, fighting suing them for the wildfires in Paradise. And Berkeleyans have a choice for community energy and not using PG&E, but PG&E, as far as I'm aware of, still has control over the smart meters, control of the different forms of electricity. I see them out every single day blocking off traffic just to put up or to fix their own infrastructure. Some campaigns in Berkeley have really gone forward with using underground tech to make sure that we have electricity available, but PG&E is still a strong player. And so this is what I'm talking about with my platform. We shouldn't have to rely on PG&E. If every district or every block has an external battery that they can rely on that focuses on solar technology, I think that's a great way to use a secondary source of energy to minimize our carbon footprint. And really, we should be working towards making more public utilities rather than public-private utilities available for people. And so as far as PG&E goes, it's time for us to fight again, because we're going into wildfire season right now. And if they fail us again, we need swift and immediate action. This is also for Aidan. How will the city council pass your policies? Great question. So the city council knows me. They know me as good trouble, if anything. I have some supporters who are on the city council, but I think it really comes down to language. How do you really influence people who don't want to hear words like radical transitions? And so in my platform, it's really based off of universal concepts. How do we get out of this climate crisis? How do we get people into housing? How do we make sure that PPE is available for all of us? These are things on the surface that I think every single council member would agree upon. How we move towards single-payer healthcare. For example, I'll use, instead of single-payer, I'll say bulk purchasing, which is the same thing. But if they understand the phrase bulk purchasing, they can get their minds around how it's not necessarily a drain on the economy. When it comes to community action and let's say defunding the police, I agree. We should defund the police in Berkeley by 50%. Having the majority budget in police officers, which goes into patrol, is not okay. But instead, I'll say things like motivating mental health care, doing a sustainable budget that focuses on childhood education. These are things that on the ground, I'm sure Berkeleyans and the city council would want to move behind. It doesn't have to be a radical script, but we do need radical transformative action. And I think with the pressures of climate change and with the pressures of our communities being more activated, we can actually get those policies passed.
As mayor, I'll ask the question, I think it's for you. As mayor, what kind of policies would you support with regard to Second Amendment rights and self-defense?
That's a good question. I'm 100% against assault rifles. They're horrible. I think even police using weapons are horrible. But the Second Amendment is interesting in the fact that it states the right to bear arms. Arms is a questionable context against a foreign invader or for the common defense. So what's the arms race right now? It's data mining. And so the right to bear arms is the right to privacy, in my opinion. And so that's why I'm working towards making sure that our data is secure. People have the right to anonymity, can't say it, but also focusing on people having the right to be able to exist without being doxxed or hacked or even invaded upon by the city of Berkeley. When it comes to protecting themselves, I think that we should use less than deadly weapons, and that means I support like small knives. I support the right to salt guns, but I don't really value those things as a person. As a person, I'm focused on nonviolence, and so that means I want to change the infrastructure where people don't even need to use of force. I want to make sure that instead of people being shot in the streets, we have a strong community defense that provides on-site care and rehabilitation for people who are injured, ways to track people who, not because of their status in society, but whether they need help. And so with regards to the Second Amendment, I think it needs a total re-envisioning. I don't think small handguns or small atomic weapons or autonomous weapons are going to help anyone. In fact, it's going to bring more divides against us. But I understand the concerns of protecting oneself. And I understand the needs for the community to see that they have a life worth deserving. I'm here to make sure that the rights to guns aren't even necessary because we have a strong social structure. It's going to take a while to build, but I believe we can.
I had a question, Aidan. When I was coming up in the Bay Area, the Black Panther Party got a referendum on community control of the police in Berkeley. And it was defeated. But even Ron Dellums, who had just been elected the new member of Congress, campaigned for it. I remember seeing a debate, and he was advocating for it on KQED. Is there a movement in the Bay Area or in Berkeley to get back to that community control of the police?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's actually on our November ballot for more community-oriented control of the police. Right now with the police commission, it's kind of halted in place because police officers in the state of California have the right to confidentiality, especially when it comes to police conduct. And so that's where we get stopped in our tracks when we're trying to control the police, because they'll just say this breaks their confidentiality rights. Instead, I really support restructuring how we charge police officers. I want to support the police commission in showing police officers who use excessive use of force, who are accomplices, even if they don't use that force and see another police officer use force, that they're also tracked. And I really want to make sure that we have a thorough background check to see if that police have any white supremacist ties or even domestic violence abuses in the past, because the community deserves to know who is on their streets using force. And we have to make sure that, and this also comes with defunding the police and expanding citizen control. If people know that a police officer is abusive against women, then that is a political and a moral claim to get that police officer off the force. And at UC Berkeley, we had a police officer, a UC Berkeley cop that had 20 years on the force, and we finally got him out of job. His name was Sean Arenas, but we finally got him out of a job because he assaulted one of our community members, and we wouldn't let it go. And I wish it didn't have to come to that around the world. I wish the police review commission could just say, oh, this person's noted for abuse, get him off the force. But we have to do a lot more to make sure that we can investigate into police misconduct. And that's on the November ballot. It's not as strong as it should be, but that's where we get people like you to keep sounding the alarm and making sure that police misconduct doesn't go unvilified.
So what's on the ballot is the review commission will get the right to investigate misconduct.
In some degrees, yes.
Yeah. What the Panther Party had on was the commission, which I imagine is appointed by the politicians.
Yes.
Yeah. No, they wanted elected by the communities.
Yes.
You know, the flats, which was predominantly black, at least back then, and then the university community, and then the hills, and each would have their own force, you know, patrolling their own communities, and then there'd be an overall police commission. I think that's key. In fact, some people advocating community control where we elect them are saying, no, we should select them by lot, like we do juries, to get the politics completely out. Because I wrote an 8,000-word essay on this. You can find it on my website, howiehawkins.us. The review boards were like the substitute for community control, and they haven't worked. You just look at the headlines. Look at what happened in Aurora, Colorado the other day. And, you know, since George Floyd got murdered on the TV screens and everybody saw it, you know, a lot of people upset about that. But the police still police themselves. That's how they get away with these crimes and murders. If we elect the people in charge to represent us, or even select them, just pull them out of the community at random, that would get the politics out. Because now police unions, along with the real estate industry, that the police force we got does what the politicians told them to do, which is to keep downscale people, particularly black people, down and out of the upscale communities, because they profit from segregation in the real estate industry. So that's what the police do. And as long as the politicians are appointing them, even if they appoint the review board, we're not going to get the kind of force that we need, whether it's, you know, defunding to redirect resources to community services, or for those serious crimes where you want somebody that what we think of police doing, dealing with violent crime and, you know, serious property crimes like burglary and car theft. They do a terrible job at that. I know from national statistics, they only clear about 25% of those crimes with arrests. And in 60% of the people who are victims or witnesses won't report to the police because they don't trust them. Because you know what? You tell the police you were there, they're going to charge you. That's the way people feel. Yeah, I think we need to up the ante on this uprising against the police brutality by saying we want community control.
And just
not
for the
just
audience here,
changes in policing policies.
and just for the audience here, I really invite you to think about the process of policing. So you find this person, you put them into a car, which I'm sure is not COVID secure. I'm sure they don't wipe down the back every time they have someone in there. And then they send them to a jail, either a county jail, a state jail, or a local jail, which I'm sure isn't taken care of. And yet we have all these cases of COVID in our prison system. I mean, we have to think about this as a public health safety hazard. Not only do people get assaulted in the back of police cars, dying in the back of police cars, not only do they get assaulted like Sandra Bland without anyone knowing what happened, they're also put into these cages. And these cages are not essentially made, especially in this country, to make sure that people rehabilitate, feel good about themselves and their lives, feel like they have opportunities to change. Instead, it's like a pen. It's like bringing people to the slaughter. And the fact that we have now in this country students who aren't doing their schoolwork and being sent to juvenile jails, I mean, that is simply, it's incarceration. And the fact that so many prisoners are being paid so little to be firefighters, to make our clothing and our products, that's exploitation. And so the entire system of policing, as it is right now, especially, something, and again, August Wagner from UC Berkeley created, I'm sorry to the global community on behalf of us, we have to really dismantle it altogether. And if we want to find ways of rehabilitating people, making sure they're not public health nuisances or institute violence, we have to really reconstruct our entire society to be nonviolent in the core of it. And the way that prisons are happening right now, the way that police are acting right now, it's all based off of this mechanistic model that says people are units and units are property. And if you notice, police are only on the scene and making sure things are okay when it comes to private property, when it comes to domestic violence suits, when it comes to like assaults on the streets, police always come afterwards. So I really, I hope people look at those trends and really see why this defund the police movement is happening. It's not just because people are shot, it's because the entire system around incarceration is really based off of slavery.
Mr. Hill, I'm not aware of how LGBTQ plus rights are in Berkeley right now, but what would you do to ensure that equality and the right to live as you are and pursue happiness as their true self?
Yeah, great question. So Andy, thank you for that. I'm non-binary. I use they, them pronouns. I know exactly what you mean when you're asking about the rights for LGBTQ people. I can tell you that a lot of the times in Berkeley, we have to do the work ourselves. We just recently passed gender neutral language when it comes to city references, like instead of manholes, we say maintenance holes. But the reality of it is that that doesn't really help us. That increases knowledge about the different use of binary language, but we don't have anything on the books that really protects LGBT people as a protected class. And so for me, when it comes to protecting people like myself, and really the reason why I'm running for office is to make sure there's representation of non-binary people in elected office anywhere in this country. It comes down to ensuring that we make sure that LGBT people know where they came from, have the right to education and knowledge, making sure that kids, especially who are gay, have a place to go to that isn't foster care if their parents kick them out. To actually think that protecting young people, intersex people, from the time that they're born, not being genitally mutilated, those are things that are important to the LGBT community, in my opinion. And we really do need to focus on the rights of all people, especially when it comes down to this government trying to make trans people's lives less than. We have to celebrate those things. We have to make sure that every incorporated area of Berkeley, there's no discrimination against LGBT kids, folks, and then seniors as well. And we have to make sure that the technology is available for people to live as their true selves. And that what me as a Black, Indigenous person of color that's on the LGBTQ spectrum, it's so important to me that I just have the right to exist, to walk down the street without being harassed or assaulted. And until we make those things a priority, I don't know how we're going to focus on protecting marginalized folks, and especially folks who don't have any sense of passing or can't pass at all. Thank you for that question, Andy.
Well, I'll just say as the president's candidate, I'm for passing the Equality Act, which would apply all civil rights and anti-discrimination laws at the federal level to the class of people based on sexual orientation and gender identity. But then the problem is, as you were just talking about, you get the law passed, then you got to get it enforced. And part of that is, you know, the kind of leadership and what their attitude is about these questions. And Trump is the worst possible person to have in office for that. And so the tone's got to change at the top so that it becomes the norm and the ethic to treat everybody on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum equally, the whole rainbow, and
even polyamorous couples, even kinksters, you're a part of us.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a right to live, as the Poor People's Campaign says, and they have a right to be treated with respect. And I think, aside from laws we pass, the political leadership should be, you know, modeling that and, you know, making affirmations so that it becomes something people think, yeah, that's what I should do.
These are great questions.
Well, we're getting on an hour.
Okay.
Are there any issues that you wanted to speak to before we wrap up?
Yeah. I think definitely talking about this next election cycle, just what we can expect in the next few months of campaigning. So as far as I can see, we're in it for a doozy because, like, again, Trump wants to be president for the foreseeable future, and he's going to do everything in his power to make sure COVID's rampant, and so we feel afraid to go to polls. Luckily in California, we only have mail-in ballots, and so that's going to happen in October. But wherever you are, really do think about a plan of action to make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure that you're not being doxxed because you vote a certain way, especially if you vote a third party. You make sure that you have your mail-in ballots ready to go, or you're as COVID safe as possible. And I wish this federal government was really focused on fair and ethical elections. The fact that so many candidates, such as Howie, has to do such extra work rather than just being a elected Democrat or elected Republican that just gets the support of their party. We have to really change that. And the best way to change it, in my opinion, where you have most power, is at the local level. Because if you speak truth to power locally, you can affect the national level. And the people who are working on all of those institutions of power, national, county, state, they will come for you and support you because you are saying the same things that they are believing in. Look to people like Howie when you're wanting to get a voice out there and really get pressure onto Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because Howie is speaking truth to power. With whatever privilege and whatever experience they have, they are using it for the common good. And it goes back to what Howie was saying, this lesser than versus greater than evil. It's all a game. It's all a masquerade. The fact is that we have only a few more years to prepare for climate change, for the inevitable nuclear disasters that these people in power are trying to pursue, and then the digital security hacks that we're seeing on Twitter and Facebook. All these things are coming to a head, and I guess November 3rd is the day when people want to play those power games. But don't feel afraid of that. Don't be afraid of those things. Speak truth to power. Speak your truth, because at the end of the day, we're humans and we're not machines. We're not AIs. We make choices, and we have the ability to make choices. And so if you want to vote for the greater good, you have that choice too, and you shouldn't have that with coercion. And so I just want to say I'm a resource for you if you want to speak about anything, if you want to talk more about politics and how we can improve society as a whole, that's great. And people like Howie are really the bridges for all of us community leaders, because while I'm focused on Berkeley, that's where I want to have my sphere of influence. Howie bridges those communities and takes them across the United States, because it would be a sad world if only Berkeley was here. I think we need an entire world that's full of the diversity and love of life that it has. And so I really want to extend my thanks to Howie, because you're doing the hard work. You're going out there into the different communities who don't understand these concepts, and you're really trying to make it easy to understand, really awaken people from whatever slumber Trump might have had on them. And like Martin Luther King, like in many ways, doing that work is more dangerous, because had MLK not been to Alabama, it could have been a different story. And so I have that privilege of being in Berkeley, but support people who are going out there in the world and being diplomats for our common goals, because at the end of the day, it's people, planet, and peace over profit. And that's the only way for us to survive this upcoming catastrophe.
Well, Aidan, you know, I'm going to wish you good luck in your campaign. Anything I can do to help, let me know.
Okay.
When
I'll take that as an endorsement.
When I talk to people in Berkeley, I got a little brother who has a print shop in Berkeley, and he actually prints those ballots and those voter guides.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if he's contracted with Alameda County this time or not, but that's his bread and butter business. Okay. And my next move, actually, after this talk, is I'm going to get my California candidate statement filed with the Secretary of State. So people will be able to, when they get that ballot, they'll be able to read, you know, summary of what I'm talking about. And you talked about speaking truth to power. I want to go beyond that. Let's get some power so we can act on the truth.
Yes.
Like the science about this pandemic, and the science about climate change, and the reality of this new nuclear arms race, and the reality that growing inequality kills. Working class life expectancies are in decline in this country. That's immoral and inexcusable in a rich country. So we need an economic bill of rights. So there's a lot to do, and I urge everybody. You got ranked choice voting in Berkeley?
Yes, we do.
Lucky you. Well, then there's no question. You don't have to worry about the lesser evil for Berkeley mayoral race. But in the California race, people got to understand, Trump is toast. You don't even need to worry about him. He don't have a chance in California. And Biden is a neoliberal hawk. So if you're at all progressive, there's only one vote. That's for Howie Hawkins and my running mate, Angela Walker. She's a truck driver. I'm a retired Teamster. We're two workers for the White House, because we need a better class of people in there than these corporate crooks and flunkies we've had in there. So that's my last word. And I enjoyed the conversation, Aidan.
Thank you, Howie. I really appreciate you.
All right.
Be safe on the campaign trail.
You be safe too.